the first pages of human memory, amid the verses of creation and the fall, there exists a silence, a mysterious gap, a name whispered with awe, and an unanswered question. Enoch. The scriptures tell us, with a stark and beautiful brevity, that he walked with God, and then, like a breath on a cold morning, he was no more, for God took him. We have accepted this as a gentle ending, a reward for a righteous life. But what if I told you his disappearance was not a period at the end of a sentence, but an ellipsis, leading into a chapter that was deliberately torn from the book? What if his departure was not an ascent into heaven, but a descent into the very fabric of truth itself? Imagine for a moment, not death, not separation, but a translocation, a veil being lifted, not for Enoch to step through, but for the universe in all its terrifying grandeur to flood into him. What if Enoch was not simply a man who was taken, but the first man to be given a key forged not from metal, but from perception, a key that could unlock doors we do not even know exist, doors that separate our tangible, physical world from the roaring spiritual realm that presses in against it. That key did not open a room, it opened a reality. For centuries, we have been told an edited story, a sanitized and approved version of faith. But have you ever felt, in the quietest moments of the night, in the deepest part of your soul, that something was missing, like a single, crucial note, absent from a cosmic symphony, or a vital chapter ripped from a sacred text, leaving behind jagged edges and an incomplete narrative? The story of Enoch is that missing chapter, a chapter that contains not just history, but a warning, a promise, and a timeless invitation addressed directly to you. Prepare yourself, because we are not merely reading a story, we are embarking on a spiritual excavation. We are about to begin a journey to find that lost key, to follow the faint trail that history tried so hard to erase. Together, we will uncover why a text once cherished by prophets and early apostles became a threat so profound it had to be sealed away. And most importantly, we will confront the ultimate question: if that key, after millennia in hiding, was somehow placed in your hand today, would you have the courage to use it? Would you dare to fit it into the lock of your own perception and turn it, ready to face what might be waiting on the other side? Take a deep breath, for the truth we are about to uncover is more staggering than any myth and more reality-altering than any legend. The journey begins now. Before the true dawn of humanity could break, a shadow fell from the stars. The Book of Enoch recounts a story that other texts only dare to mention in hushed, fearful tones. This was not a simple, prideful rebellion in heaven. No, this was a calculated conspiracy, a cosmic plot. A legion of celestial beings, entities tasked with watching over creation and known as the Watchers, gazed down upon the fledgling earth. But in their luminous eyes was not the protective love of a guardian, but the acquisitive lust of a thief and the cold envy of a rival. They saw humanity made in God's image, and they wanted to counterfeit his work. Upon a high mountain, they swore an oath to one another, a pact of betrayal sealed with binding curses. They descended in unison, not as messengers of light, but as the bearers of a counterfeit dawn, ad deceptive illumination. They took the daughters of men as their wives, but this union was not merely an act of passion. It was a deliberate act of genetic and spiritual contamination, a forbidden mingling of divine essence with earthly clay. From this unholy fusion, the Nephilim were born. They were not merely giants, they were a grotesque parody, a living caricature of the divine image, possessed of titanic strength and an insatiable hunger that could never be filled. They consumed everything in their path: crops, animals, and even humanity itself, sowing violence and chaos, turning the earth into a primordial hell. But their greatest and most subtle sin was not of the flesh, it was in the knowledge they carried. They unlocked the secret vaults of heaven, but instead of bestowing wisdom, they dealt in cursed jewels. They taught humanity the art of warfare, how to forge metal into swords and spears, not for defense, but for domination. They taught the movements of the stars, not for awe and navigation, but for divination and the grasping of power. They revealed the secrets of roots and herbs, not for healing, but for the weaving of enchantments and the brewing of poisons. They even taught the arts of cosmetic adornment, not to celebrate beauty, but to inflame lust and vanity. It was a poisoned bestowal, a gift beautifully wrapped but containing chains. They shackled humanity to a cycle of dependency, fear, and violence. They gave mankind the power to destroy itself, but stole its innocence and its harmonious connection to creation. Does this pattern feel familiar? A seductive exchange, a shortcut to power and knowledge, but the price is your very soul, your true freedom. That counterfeit dawn promised enlightenment, but in the end, it brought only a deeper and more profound darkness. While the earth groaned and buckled under the weight of this corruption, while the counterfeit dawn cast its long, dark shadows, one man walked in the light, Enoch. He lived in the midst of a decaying world, but its decay could not touch him. He was not called, however, to fight with a sword or a spear. His weapon was not of metal, but of reed and ink. He was called to write. In a series of visions that shook his body and spirit to their core, Enoch was taken, not as a tourist, but as a witness summoned to a cosmic trial in session. Imagine being escorted by archangels, beings of pure, terrifying light, through the layers of the heavens, each more dazzling and formidable than the last. Enoch saw the celestial vaults, the storehouses of snow and hail, the very mechanics of the cosmos that no astronomer could ever conceive. He saw the resting places of the righteous souls, bathed in light, and the chasms where the wicked trembled, awaiting judgment. But then he was brought to a place no mortal had ever seen, and lived, the prison of the stars, a fiery abyss at the edge of creation. There, in a scene both tragic and terrifying, he witnessed the rebel watchers, once the shining stars of the morning, now bound in chains of shadow and eternal fire, awaiting their final sentence. And it was here that Enoch's true and unique role was revealed. He was not merely a passive observer. He was commissioned to be the scribe of heaven. He was to be the one to record the indictment against those who had betrayed their sacred covenant. He was to document their crimes, their boundless arrogance, and the inescapable judgment that was now bearing down on them like a coming storm. His mission was a profound paradox. A mortal man, fragile and finite, was called to mediate between heaven and earth. He was to carry the desperate pleas of the fallen angels before the throne, a plea he knew would be denied. And then he was to carry the unalterable sentence of God back down to them. Enoch became a pen in the hand of the Almighty, a vessel for recording a truth too vast, too terrible, too complex for the world at that time to comprehend. Can you feel the impossible weight of that charge? To chronicle the fall of gods, while you yourself are only a man made of dust. He wrote, not with ink, but with his very soul. Enoch's journey into the heart of mystery did not end with witnessing the judgment of the rebellious. After fulfilling his duty as a reluctant celestial court reporter, he was led further and higher, beyond the heavens, beyond the angelic orders, to the very epicenter of all existence. He was brought before a throne, not made of gold or jewels, but woven from pure, living light. A throne that blazed with a glory no language could describe, a light that was at once creative and consuming. And there, beside the Ancient of Days, an embodiment of time and eternity itself, Enoch saw another figure, a figure his writings would later describe with ultimate reverence and astonishment. He called him the Son of Man. He also called him the Chosen One. This was not a being newly created. Enoch's vision revealed that he had existed before the sun, and the stars were hung in the sky, before the foundations of the earth were laid. He was not an angel among the heavenly host. He was something other, something unique. He was the embodiment of righteousness, the wellspring of all wisdom and the keeper of all the secrets of the Most High. Enoch saw him seated upon a throne of glory, given all power to judge every creature, both those who dwell in the heavens and those who walk the earth. In his vision, Enoch foresaw a day when the kings and the powerful of the world, those who had deified themselves, would bow before him. But their prostration would not be out of reverence, but out of sheer terror, for the light that emanated from this Son of Man exposed every shadow, every conspiracy, every hidden sin in the deepest corners of their hearts. He was absolute truth, and no falsehood could stand in his presence. Now, pause for a moment and truly contemplate this staggering revelation. Hundreds, if not thousands, of years before the prophecies of Isaiah were penned, millennia before a star shone over Bethlehem, Enoch was writing of a powerful, pre-existent Messiah, a cosmic king, a universal judge of all souls. This was not a vague promise, a shadowy premonition of a future savior. This was a clear, detailed, and living vision of a Messiah who already existed and reigned as the centerpiece of the cosmic plan. This is one of the most explosive secrets, one of the most brilliant jewels in the treasure chest of the Book of Enoch. It presents a Christology that predates the New Testament itself, a vision of a cosmic Christ. It suggests that the plan of redemption was not a plan B, a reaction to the fall of man. No, it was the blueprint of redemption, an eternal design, a primordial intention that existed before time began. And this raises an unsettling question, one that could shake the foundations of what we thought we knew. If such a clear and powerful image of the Messiah existed so early, why was it erased from the official story? Could it be that this prophecy came too soon, was too potent, and was too independent of the narrative that men later wanted to control? You might think that a book, once officially discarded and labeled as apocryphal, would vanish without a trace, erased by the sands of time. But the truth is far more complex and fascinating. Like a great river flowing underground, the influence of the Book of Enoch continued to silently seep into and nourish the very bedrock of early Christian thought. It didn't shout for attention, it whispered, and if you listen closely enough, you can still hear its echoes in the most unexpected places. Open your New Testament and turn to one of its shortest, most overlooked letters, the Epistle of Jude. This was no minor figure. Jude is introduced as the brother of James, and by tradition, the very brother of Jesus Christ, a man who grew up under the same roof, who heard his teachings from childhood. In his letter, while warning against false teachers who had infiltrated the church, Jude does something astonishing, something that, when understood in its context, should stop us in our tracks. He quotes directly from the Book of Enoch. He writes, "It was also about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones, to execute judgment on all." Stop there. That quote, "Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones," cannot be found anywhere else in the Old Testament. It is not from Genesis, Exodus, or the major prophets. It is an almost verbatim quotation from the first chapter of the Book of Enoch. Jude did not call it a fable or a folk tale. He introduced Enoch as a prophet and cited his words as authoritative prophecy, placing them on par with other revered prophetic writings. Let that sink in. A member of the Messiah's own family, a pillar of the early church, considered the Book of Enoch to be a source of divine and trustworthy revelation. And the whispers don't stop with Jude. Read the Book of Revelation by John. The visions of celestial warfare, of angels in chains, of judgment by fire, of the throne of God, and of the heavenly books of life and death being opened, all of these vivid apocalyptic images bear a striking, almost reflective, resemblance to the visions Enoch recorded centuries earlier. The Apostle Peter, in his second letter, also speaks of the angels who sinned, whom God cast into hell and committed to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. This is a clear allusion to the story of the Watchers, The undeniable truth is that the Book of Enoch was part of the spiritual air the first Christians breathed. It was the ghost in the machine of New Testament thought. The question, then, becomes even more urgent and uncomfortable. How could a text that was so foundational, quoted by the family of Jesus, and echoed in the writings of the apostles, later be deemed unworthy and cast out? What changed so dramatically in the span of just a few short centuries? The answer to that sudden shift lies not in a new theological revelation, but in a far more worldly one, a shift in power. In the 4th century, Christianity underwent a seismic transformation. From a persecuted movement, hunted and forced to meet in catacombs, it became the official religion of the mighty Roman Empire. With this newfound power and prestige came an urgent need for order, for uniformity, and most importantly, for control. A faith that was once wild and diverse now needed to be standardized. Imagine the faith of the first few centuries as a wild, sprawling forest, a place of ancient trees reaching for the heavens, of mysterious paths, of strange flowers blooming in unexpected places, and of encounters with the divine that were unpredictable and personal. The church leaders of that era, now backed by the emperor and the state apparatus, looked at this forest and decided it was too dangerous, too chaotic. They needed to turn it into a walled garden, a Roman-style garden, with neatly trimmed hedges in straight lines, gravel paths clearly laid out, and everything in its proper, designated place. In the process of building these walls, at councils like the Council of Laodicea, around 364 AD, they began the momentous task of compiling an official list, a canon, which means a rule or standard of books that were permitted to be read and taught in the churches, and anything that was too wild, too uncontrollable, too challenging to the structure of the garden had to be left outside those walls. The Book of Enoch was the very embodiment of that spiritual wilderness. It did not follow the pre-approved paths. It spoke of divine judgment against kings and rulers, a dangerous message in an empire trying to merge church and state. It described a direct, unmediated connection to God, an idea that could undermine the authority of a growing clerical hierarchy. It contained complex cosmic visions and metaphysical concepts that did not fit easily into the simplified doctrines being crafted for the masses. Rather than trying to understand its complexity, they chose to exclude it. The official reasons given were that it could lead to heresy, that it was too mythological and could be misinterpreted. But perhaps the real fear was not that the flock would get lost. The real fear was that the flock would find its own way, a way that didn't require the garden's gatekeepers. The removal of the Book of Enoch was an act of deliberate pruning. They cut off a branch they deemed unruly, a branch that was gnarled and grew in its own direction. But in doing so, they may have severed one of the deepest and strongest roots of the tree of faith, a root that drew its nourishment directly from the primordial soil of revelation. The garden became safer, more orderly, more manageable, but it also became far less magical and infinitely less mysterious. While the garden walls of doctrine were being erected ever higher in the West, and the shadow of forgetfulness began to fall over the Book of Enoch like a thick shroud of dust, a single flame continued to burn brightly, steadfast and silent, in a distant land, a land of ancient mountains, of stone-carved monasteries, and a faith that remained untouched by the political machinations and theological debates of Rome and Constantinople. That land was Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest and most continuous Christian communities in the world, made a different choice. Confronted with the same text, they did not see a threat to be eliminated. They saw a treasure to be preserved. While councils in the West were debating which books to keep and which to discard, the monks and scholars of Ethiopia embraced the Book of Enoch with reverence. They didn't just read it in private, they canonized it, officially recognizing it as an integral part of their holy scripture. To this very day, the Book of Enoch resides within their Bible. read and meditated upon as the Word of God. How was this possible? How did this precious heritage survive intact when it had vanished almost everywhere else? The answer lies in their geographic isolation and their unwavering devotion. Tucked away in the remote highlands, protected by formidable mountain ranges, the monks dedicated their lives, generation after generation, to the painstaking task of meticulously copying every letter, every line of this ancient text in the ancient Ge'ez language, by flickering candlelight in cold monastery cells. To the rhythm of chanting and prayer, they became the keepers of the sacred flame. They did not just preserve a book, they preserved a window into heaven, a spiritual legacy that the rest of the Christian world had chosen to forget or actively suppress. Think of this incredible contrast. While one half of the Christian world was busy building a faith based on rules, power structures, and doctrinal uniformity, the other half, in its quiet humility, was safeguarding a faith based on mystery, vision, and personal experience. Perhaps, free from the machinery of empire, they had the freedom to listen to a deeper truth, a truth unfiltered by human committees and decrees. They did not try to cage the wild lion of revelation. They let it roam free in their lands. They kept the key from rusting. They ensured that one day, when the world was ready, when the cracks began to appear in the garden walls, the door it was meant to open would not be lost forever. For over 1,000 years, to the entire Western world, the Book of Enoch was nothing more than a name, a faint memory mentioned in the writings of the early church fathers. It had been exiled from the libraries, erased from the sermons, and buried under the accumulated dust of history. It became a legend, a phantom book that was spoken of, but could no longer be read. It was the Atlantis of religious literature, sunk beneath the ocean of forgotten things, until a single sound broke the centuries of silence. In the late 18th century, a bold and somewhat eccentric Scottish explorer named James Bruce undertook a journey that seemed impossible to his contemporaries. He traveled deep into the Ethiopian highlands, a land considered mysterious, dangerous, and almost inaccessible to Europeans of that era. His stated goal was to find the source of the legendary Blue Nile, but he would find something far more precious and primordial. After spending years living among the Ethiopian monks, learning their language and culture, and earning their trust, he was shown the treasure they had so faithfully guarded. He returned to Europe, not with gold or new maps, but with manuscripts, 3 complete copies of the Book of Enoch, painstakingly written in the ancient Ge'ez script. Try to imagine that moment, the significance of this discovery. It was like an archaeologist unearthing the lost city of Troy, or a musicologist finding a lost symphony by a great composer. A text believed to be gone forever suddenly reappeared, intact and alive. This return from exile sent a shockwave through the academic world of Europe. For the first time in over a millennium, Western scholars could read the words that Jude had quoted, could understand the imagery that was so familiar to the apostles. The veil of time had been lifted, and yet, even after this miraculous discovery, the garden walls stood firm. The institutional churches did not rush to welcome the long-lost son home. No councils were reconvened to reconsider the canon. No apologies were issued. The door of the canon remained closed. The Book of Enoch was eagerly welcomed by historians, linguists, and spiritual seekers hungry for deeper knowledge. But the major religious institutions kept a cautious distance. The book had returned, but it remained an outsider, a strange guest in the very house it had helped to build. This only deepens the mystery. Even when the truth is brought into the light, proven to be real, why does power still choose to look away? Is it that they were not afraid of what the book said, but of what it might do? So why does this ancient story, this tale of a lost and found book, matter to us today? We live in a world of smartphones, artificial intelligence, endless information streams, and virtual realities. A story about fallen angels and cosmic visions can seem distant, almost irrelevant. But the answer, surprisingly, lies precisely within that modern chaos. We are living in an age that makes the Book of Enoch more relevant and more urgent than ever before. Recall the core sin of the Watchers. They did not give humanity pure truth. They gave them a distorted version of knowledge, a kind of knowledge designed to addict, to divide, and ultimately, to control. They gave humanity the tools to create conflict and violence. They taught humanity to pursue external beauty and fleeting power, while the inner soul was left to atrophy. They created a counterfeit dawn, an illusion of progress. Now, look unflinchingly at our world. We are drowning in an ocean of information, yet we are starving for true wisdom. We are connected to thousands of people through social platforms, yet we feel more isolated and lonely than ever. We possess technology that can create fake images, videos, and voices, deep fakes that are indistinguishable from reality, blurring the lines between what is true and what is false. We are living in a digital age counterfeit dawn. The distorted knowledge, the half-truths, and the toxic enchantments the Watchers brought down are now being amplified on a global scale through algorithms and glowing screens. And this is where Enoch's key becomes priceless. The Book of Enoch is not just a story about the past. It is a manual for discernment in the present. It teaches us a core lesson. There is always a spiritual battle being waged behind the stage of the physical world. A battle between truth and deception, creation and destruction. It warns us of the danger of passively accepting knowledge without questioning its source and its ultimate purpose. It reminds us that there is a profound difference between true progress, which elevates the human spirit, and the seductive allure of destruction, which promises power but delivers only emptiness. Enoch's key, placed in your hand today, is not a physical object. It is the capacity for discernment. It is the ability to look beyond the surface, to see past the glossy veneer to the substance within. It is the courage to question the narratives the world is telling you every day through media, advertising, and ideology. It is the desire to seek a deeper, more enduring truth that can anchor your soul in the storm of chaos. The question is no longer why the key was taken away thousands of years ago. The question now is, what will you do with it? Right here, right now. We have come to the end of this journey of discovery. But in truth, we are standing at a new beginning. On the threshold of perception, the mystery of why the Book of Enoch was cast out of the mainstream canon is now clearer. It is a story of fear, of power, and of control. It was a deliberate human attempt to close a door they deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable, a door that led to a direct connection with the divine, bypassing their authority. But history, in its own ironic and miraculous way, has revealed a stunning truth. No door can be locked forever when God wills it to be opened. No human wall can hold back a truth whose time has come. The return of the Book of Enoch in our time, its re-emergence from the shadows of obscurity, is not a historical accident. It feels like a purposeful intervention, like a message in a bottle, cast into the sea thousands of years ago, that has weathered the storms of centuries and has now washed ashore on the beach of our generation, at the precise moment we need it most. The moment when we are drowning in a flood of counterfeit information, desperate for a lifeline of truth. So what is the true legacy of Enoch? It is not a rigid set of doctrines or a dry list of rules. His legacy is a living, breathing invitation. It is an invitation to walk with God, not through a mediator, an institution, or a hierarchy, but directly, personally, and intimately. It is an invitation to have the courage to gaze into the unseen realm, to recognize that our reality is vastly larger, more complex, and more wondrous than our physical eyes can see or our science can measure. It is an invitation to become tireless seekers of truth in a world intoxicated with sweet-tasting lies. The story of Enoch shatters the illusion that divine revelation, a connection to heaven, is reserved for a select few, the ordained, the powerful, the privileged. Enoch was an ordinary man. He was a father and a husband. He was like you and me. And his extraordinary life stands as an eternal testament that anyone, regardless of their station, who possesses a heart that hungers for truth and a spirit that is brave enough to seek, can hear the voice of God, can walk in his presence. The door has been reopened. The key has been placed in the hands of our generation. You will not find it in cathedrals made of stone and mortar, but you will find it in the stillness of your own soul, in the yearning of your own heart. Do not let this story end here. As a piece of interesting information, let it be a catalyst. Seek out the Book of Enoch. Read it. Wrestle with it. Let its visions challenge what you think you know, because a long-buried truth is rising again, and perhaps it is no accident that you have heard this story today. Perhaps you are one of the ones being called to help bring that truth back into the light. So, you stand upon the threshold. The door is open, and the key of Enoch, cold, with the weight of millennia, rests in your hand. The invitation has been extended, but now the true journey begins. And here is the first truth you must confront. The initial and most arduous battle is not against the external forces that hid this book, nor against the institutions that built the garden walls. No, the first war is waged within. It is the war against the walls you have built inside your own mind. Imagine that the soul of every human, at its birth, is like a perfect mirror, capable of reflecting the unfiltered light of truth and the pristine image of the Creator, but over generations, through edited doctrines, inherited fears, and systemic forgetting, that mirror has been fractured. It has been shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. Now, when you look into it, you no longer see a unified image. You see only disjointed, distorted reflections, a fragment of revelation here, a sliver of fear there, a piece of dogma, a shard of doubt. We have lived with this shattered mirror for so long that we have come to believe its fragmented reflection is reality itself. The Book of Enoch, the key you now hold, is not a magical glue that will instantly repair the fractures. No, its role is far more subtle. It acts as a powerful beam of light that, when shone upon the mirror, does not hide the cracks, but illuminates them. For the first time, you can clearly see the fragmentation within your own perception. You see the fault lines that separate faith from reason, mystery from safety, the spiritual being you long to be from, the programmed person you currently are. As you begin to read Enoch's words, an internal struggle will erupt. A part of you, the part that has grown comfortable in the walled garden, will scream, "This is dangerous. This is fantasy. Turn back to what is familiar and safe." That voice will use the very same arguments the ancient church fathers used to discard the book. It will tell you that you are not qualified, that you will be led astray, that these things are not meant for you. It is the voice of the inner jailer, terrified that his prisoner will discover the prison walls are made of paper. But there is another voice, a deeper and quieter whisper. It is the echo of a primordial memory, a memory of when your mirror was still whole. It is the voice of intuition, of the part of your soul that never truly forgot its origin. This voice will recognize the truth in Enoch's visions, not as new information, but as something long forgotten. It will feel the resonance. Reading the Book of Enoch is not an act of learning. It is an act of remembering. Remembering that you were made for a direct connection to the divine. Remembering that the cosmos is more complex and multi-layered than you were taught. Remembering that you have an infinite spiritual potential waiting to be awakened. This journey requires courage. The courage to face the emptiness in the cracks of the mirror. The courage to question what you once held as absolute truth. And the courage to trust the whisper of your soul over the screaming of your fear. The key of Enoch does not open an external door. It opens the door to your own inner battlefield. And victory in that war is not about destroying an enemy, but about coaxing the shattered pieces of the mirror to begin finding their way back to each other, so that one day you can look in and see your own true face, whole and complete, reflecting the light of eternity. Once you have begun this inner journey, with the key of discernment held firmly in your hand, you will find it impossible to look at the outside world in the same way again. The visions of Enoch cease to be just an ancient story. They become a powerful lens through which you can view the reality of the 21st century, and as you look through that lens, you will recognize an alarming truth. The Watchers never really left. They merely changed their methods. Their conspiracy to usher in a counterfeit dawn is still in full effect, but the battlefield has shifted from the ancient mountains to the digital ether, and their poisoned gifts are now packaged in sleek interfaces and invisible algorithms. Recall what the Watchers taught humanity. They taught the forging of metal into weapons, sowing division and violence. Today, they have no need for smithies. They craft the algorithms of social media platforms, algorithms designed to amplify anger, Outrage, and polarization. They create echo chambers where we only hear opinions that mirror our own, until those with different views are no longer seen as opponents, but as enemies. The weapons today are not swords and spears, but hate-filled comment threads, weaponized disinformation that spreads at the speed of light, and cancel culture weapons that can kill reputations, destroy relationships, and erode the very fabric of society. The Watchers taught sorcery and enchantments for manipulation and control. Today, that magic is called user engagement. They have created a virtual world where we are mesmerized by an endless scroll, where likes and shares act as tiny, intermittent dopamine hits, keeping us addicted and tethered to our screens. They have created augmented realities and metaverses, promising an escape from the real world, but which are in fact beautifully decorated digital prisons where our every move can be tracked or desire manipulated, and our data sold without our knowledge. Is this not a modern form of sorcery, a mass enchantment on a global scale? The Watchers taught the art of cosmetics and adornment to stir up vanity and comparison. Today, they have given us one-click photo filters that allow us to create flawless, perfected versions of ourselves. We live in a culture of endless comparison, where we measure our self-worth against the carefully curated highlight reels of others. Insecurity has become an industry, and the hunger for virtual validation is corroding our sense of intrinsic worth in the real world. Their children, the Nephilim, were beings of insatiable hunger. Is our hunger for digital validation any different? Holding the key of Enoch gives you the power of discernment. You begin to look at your smartphone not just as a tool, but as a potential cursed artifact. You begin to ask questions. Who profits from my attention? Who does this algorithm serve? What emotion is this information trying to provoke in me, understanding or hatred? The key helps you see through the interface to the intent behind it. It helps you recognize that the fight against distraction, division, and emptiness in the digital age is simply the modern iteration of the spiritual warfare Enoch witnessed. The Watchers are here, and their shadow is a digital one. But now, you have the light to see them. So, what are we to do with this knowledge? Having confronted the inner war and seen through the illusions of the modern world, what is the next step? To stop at mere recognition is to risk sinking into cynicism or despair. But the legacy of Enoch is not a final judgment. It is a call to begin a great work. The return of this book is not just meant to make us wise seekers, but to transform us into purposeful actors. It doesn't just give us a key, it invites us to become the locksmiths of the future. For centuries, the dominant model of faith was built on passive obedience. We were taught to be good sheep in a protected garden, cared for and led by shepherds. But Enoch's story proposes a different, more radical and demanding model. It does not call us to be sheep. It calls us to be explorers, and ultimately, to be builders. If the Watchers broke the covenant between heaven and earth by bringing down toxic knowledge, then the mission of our generation is to become the covenant builders. This work of building begins within. It starts by refusing to be a passive consumer of information and becoming an active seeker of truth. It means deliberately turning off the noise of the digital world so you can hear the whisper of your own soul. It means practicing silence, prayer, meditation. Whatever discipline reconnects you to your inner source of light. To rebuild the covenant means to first rebuild your personal, direct, and unmediated relationship with the Most High. Just as Enoch did, you need no one's permission to walk with God. But this work cannot remain purely individual. A covenant is relational, and it is also communal. To be a builder means to seek out others who have also been awakened, others who are holding their own keys. It means creating spaces, small communities where truth is valued, where discernment is practiced, and where authentic connection is prioritized over virtual interaction. Imagine creating oases of sanity in the desert of digital chaos, where people can share their discoveries, support each other in their inner struggles, and learn to use the lens of Enoch together. The greatest work of the covenant builders is to create alternatives. Instead of just cursing the darkness, we are called to light candles. If the world sows division, we must cultivate understanding. If the world promotes superficiality, we must pursue depth. If the world worships the ego, we must practice humility and service. Every act of kindness, every word of truth, every decision to opt out of the outrage machine, every moment of choosing real connection over virtual distraction, these are the bricks we use to rebuild the bridge between heaven and earth. The revelation of Enoch is not an ending. It is a blueprint. It is an invitation to shift from the role of a passive believer to that of an active co-creator with God in the work of restoration. This is a tremendous responsibility, but it is also an incomparable honor. The key in your hand is not just for opening a door for yourself. It is the tool you have been given to help build a new door for humanity. The work awaits. Are you ready to begin building?